Would the 1978 Constitutional Convention please come to order?
With the sounding of the gavel, and with those words by Delegate Floyd Pullum, Chairman Pro Tem, ConCon 78 got underway on Wednesday, July 5th, 1978.
I'm Bob Miller for Hawaii Public Television. 102 delegates elected by the people of Hawaii on May 20th are meeting here in Honolulu's historic federal building and courthouse to review Hawaii's state constitution and to decide whether and what changes should be recommended to the voters. ConCon 78 began in a manner that has become traditional with our governmental bodies. A welcome chant was given by Edith Kanakaole. Martha Hohu led in the singing of Hawaii Pono'i. An invocation by the Reverend David Kaupu, ancient dances, and the giving of symbolic gifts to the state by each of the island districts.
Ikona kahuo mako no.
While the opening entertainment was traditional, the opening remarks were not. Delegate Floyd Pullum, who was temporary chairman by virtue of having received the largest number of votes in the first ConCon district, used the occasion to express the feelings of many delegates about the convention's teething problems.
No group or individual, regardless of purpose, has any right to usurp that basic right of the people. We have already spent over a month tied up with organizational and logistical considerations. And I don't need to remind you that groups have already been formed based on other than constitutional issues. It is indeed a pity the established political system lacked the wisdom to foresee these problems. We now find ourselves using the same personnel and resources available to them, and through which much of these problems could have been handled in advance, freeing the convention for its larger role without the added burden of establishing a political system of its own. That was yesterday. Today it is history, and let us hope that both we and future legislators profit by its lesson. My job today is to charge each and every one of us with the moral responsibility of being a better person than we were yesterday. While democracy must have its organization and controls, its vital breath is individual liberty. If we as delegates are to accomplish a task we were elected to perform, and if we expect the general public to accept the results of our deliberations, some of you are going to have to clean up your act. Let us proceed with the following in mind. Democracy means not that I am as good as you are, but rather, my friends, it means you are as good as I am. Yes, democracy means many things. Certainly it means majority rule, but much more, for it requires freedom of expression for minorities and even minority representation. I know some of you are saying, okay, we're organized, so let's get on with the business. Let's get to the issues. I would be remiss in my duties as your temporary chairman if I did not remind you that we are organized as an oligarchy, not a democracy. This body needs to make a decisive move to reestablish its credibility with the public, or our future deliberations will remain forever suspect. It has been said that after this session is over, only our work, or lack of it, will be remembered. I don't agree with that. Just as we look back to the conventions of 1950 and 1968, history will look back at this convention, and as your individual actions are judged, so will your contribution to history be judged. By your winning a single election, each of you were elevated to a position in the history of this state. You may not be ready for it, but it is here, and the results are up to you. I repeat, are we capable of being a better person than we were yesterday? Do I believe we can do it? Yes, I certainly do. Why? Because I believe in another democratic principle, and it says that democracy is based upon the conviction that there are extraordinary possibilities in ordinary people. Mahalo.
Then, after all 102 delegates present were found to be qualified to sit in the convention, they were given their oath of office by Chief Justice William S. Richardson.
Would the delegates to the 1978 Constitutional Convention please raise their right hands and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of Hawaii,
and the Constitution of the State of Hawaii,
and that I will faithfully discharge my duties
and I will faithfully discharge my duties
as a delegate
as a delegate
to the 1978 Constitutional Convention
to the 1978 Constitutional Convention
of the State of Hawaii
of the State of Hawaii
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Governor George Ariyoshi, who himself had been a delegate to the 1968 ConCon, charged the delegates to conduct an open convention in the interest of Hawaii's people.
An almost sacred task, the review of the Constitution of the State of Hawaii. And to the hands of a few has been placed the trust of many. You are the architects of our future, and what you do or choose not to do will affect all of our lives for many years to come. I am sure that I do not need to impress upon you the importance of your tasks. Their magnitude was known to you when you sought election to this convention, and I am sure have been further impressed upon you in your preliminary deliberations. I do not intend to speak here this morning at any length, but permit me a few observations based on my experience as a Constitutional Convention delegate 10 years ago, and also as governor of this state during some of the most trying and challenging years of our existence. I hope that none of you come to this convention with such a rigidity of ideas that you are inflexible. You all have convictions, and that is as it should be. You also have areas in which you feel very strongly, and again, that is as it should be. But please do not be so strong, either in convictions or areas of concerns, that you cannot approach the proceedings here with an open mind. Please do not be so convinced of the correctness of a certain position that you cannot listen to another side or a contrary point of view. It is the sharing of ideas and viewpoints and wisdom that will make this convention a worthwhile exercise for the people of Hawaii. It is in your flexibility to expand beyond what you now may feel is possible that will determine the success or failure of this convention. I am not advocating that you abandon long-held beliefs and philosophies, but I am advocating a tolerance for contrary points of views and a spirit of cooperation. The democratic process is best served when we have free and open discussions, and when we have a willingness to consider the points of views others than our own. No one at this convention can afford to have tunnel vision. There must be a wide field upon which the issues of this convention can be played, and it would be tragic, in my view, if this convention failed to consider all the alternatives to all the issues. It just might be that an alternative not now in favor or even considered might be the best ultimate choice. I do not feel that the success or failure of this Constitutional Convention will be measured either by how few or how many changes are made. Rather, success or failure will be measured by the approach to the problems and the processes by which decisions are made. The acceptance and rejection of ideas, that is what is important, and that is what history will remember. Also, I hope that the delegates to this convention will continue to recognize the uniqueness of this state. We are unique in so many ways, in geography, in people, in resources, in problems, and in solutions. We have a unique approach to living. We have a unique concept of the dignity of all persons, regardless of ethnic origins or economic circumstances. We have a unique quality called the aloha spirit, which possibly is our most prized but yet fragile possession. Our uniqueness is precious, and it must be preserved. I hope that the document ultimately emerging from the convention will reflect that. We are the only island state in this union of states, and we have become accustomed, partly because of our geographical isolation, to finding our own solutions and developing our own style. That independence of spirit and action and style must be continued. We must adopt Hawaiian solutions to Hawaiian problems. And certainly, we can borrow from the wisdom and the experiences of others, but we cannot and we should not blindly assume that something is good for Hawaii merely because it happens to be good for some other area. At present, we have a very strong central government. For instance, we are alone in having a statewide school system and a statewide system for the delivery of health, social, and other human services. Is that bad? The proponents of home rule would say, yes. The proponents of equal opportunities for all of our citizens, regardless of where they live, rural or urban, affluent or not, would say no. Home rule is a catchphrase with much appeal. But equal opportunities and equal services for all also have great appeal. Are the two philosophies inconsistent? Can they be reconciled? Should they be reconciled? I will not attempt to answer these questions here today. I bring them up only as being illustrative of the issues that you will confront. They are indeed worthy of your best efforts, and I urge once again that you approach the challenging task ahead of you with an open-mindedness that will do credit to this Assembly and to this state. The preamble for our present Constitution notes that the people of Hawaii are, and I quote, mindful of our Hawaiian heritage. This says volumes about our approach to government, and I hope that these words would become a living slogan for this convention. The preamble also says that we approach all the world with an understanding heart. These are not just words. They represent a credo of life in these islands, a credo that has served us so well over the years, and one that can carry us forward into the years ahead. The challenges you face beginning today are great, but even greater is the opportunity to serve in a very unique way our state and all of its citizens. You have my prayerful support as you begin your deliberations. Mahalo and aloha.
Although the selection of permanent convention officers had been decided in pre-convention meetings by the delegates, there was a contest for the presidency on opening day. William Patey of Waialua, the choice of the majority of the delegates, was challenged by Walter Cabral of Kailua. By secret ballot, Patey was elected by a vote of 69 to 33.
Bill Patey has long been active in business and professional boards and commissions in Hawaii.
Bill, congratulations very much. I have to turn the gavel over to you. It looks like it's getting to be a habit. I did this last time.
Thank you. Governor's left, Lieutenant Governor Doyle, Chief Justice Richardson, distinguished guests, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank Delegate Floyd Pullum for doing an excellent job in convening this convention. First District from Hawaii could be well proud of a fine effort in conducting this election and getting us started on the Constitution trail. And I want, too, to thank those of you who were so complimentary in my nomination. I wasn't all sure who you were talking about for a while, but and I appreciated those who supported my candidacy. I want to say that I feel it's an honor and a rare privilege to serve as president of the 78th Constitutional Convention for the state of Hawaii. I'm well aware that my election was anything but unanimous, although at no time did I ever think that it would be. And I'm also aware of the basic concerns that triggered this contest, and I fully intend to work hard to try to allay those concerns as we proceed on in the business of this convention. And I hope those of you who have these concerns will afford me this opportunity. Now, what lies ahead? As I sat listening to the opening ceremony, the Oli to Pele, the Oli to Liliuokalani, and the welcoming chant by Auntie Edith Kanakaole, it seemed to me that perhaps never before in our island history are we as an island people re-seeking so strongly our Hawaiian heritage on the one hand, while on the other we try to cope with the multifaceted problems of an electronic age and with it the dynamic changes in knowledge, values, and lifestyles. Drawing in, if you will, our aina, those things that have served us so well for so long, as we try to chart ahead a course that would afford the best in safeguards, the best in opportunity for the people of Hawaii.
Delegate Michael Liu had placed Cabral's name in nomination to oppose Patey and had made a strong appeal for Cabral's support to the delegates. Later, Liu said he felt his efforts had served a good cause.
Well, my reaction, I think, I'm not disappointed. I think Mr. Patey indicated in his acceptance speech that he saw clearly that his selection as president was not unanimous. There was no attempt to make it unanimous, as I think Mr. Porteous was, when he was selected in 1968, there was after he was selected as president-elect, it was done unanimously. So I think the message was clear, though the vote didn't come our way, per se, that the message is that Mr. Patey is still, in a sense, will have to prove his leadership to the whole convention.
Well, you've been promised that there will be open debate on all issues. Do you feel that that will be effective in terms of getting your ideas across, or will it just be fruitless debate?
Well, I like to be optimistic that the debate, whether it be on the floor or in committees, will be worthwhile. People who are, quote, on the majority side have indicated that, you know, they want to listen. But I've been in the legislature for 4 years. As an aide, and I've seen many debates on the floors and committees, and I think realistically, it's still going to be a difficult task.
Cabral, who had given his name to the opposition to the convention majority, also felt that the effort had not been in vain, even though the final result was fully expected.
As you know, we sort of started out to offer up symbolic opposition, and for a while momentum was starting to pick up, and there was some fantasizing going on by the people who were supporting me that if I did win the election, just how would I approach the leadership and so forth. But certainly not, I was not disappointed at all. I think we achieved what we had hoped to achieve, and that was to make very vocal and public to the people of Hawaii that unless they take a deep concern and involvement in the processes of the constitutional review, that there is a possibility that they may be deprived of getting a fair hearing.
One person, one delegate, it was quoted in the press, not by name, as saying that you people were not independents, but rather were dissidents. At least this person thought of you as that. Do you agree?
Certainly not. I think that when you define radicals, they're opposed to the basic charter of the people. We're certainly not opposed to the basic charter of the people. We're opposed to the manner in which the people are being represented. If you want to call us dissidents, so be it. I care not. The main thing is that we were striving to proceed with an open convention that would give the public fair representation. That's it.
Do you think that the assurances of open debate on all issues are going to be meaningful in terms of getting any of the ideas that you may have across?
Well, when it comes to issues, even the faction that I identified myself with, the so-called independents, we differ on issues. It doesn't necessarily say that we're all going to stand together, but hopefully, if the leadership of the convention proceeds as I'm hopeful that it will, and being optimistic, the way Mr. Patey had replied to being put on the spot by our group, that everyone will have an opportunity to present their concerns on the various issues. The power play then will be to try to gather as much momentum and support to promote the issues that one believes in.
The first day's ConCon activities were rounded up with a number of parties in the tradition of the state legislature. On Thursday and Friday, the convention got down to business. Convention President William Patey.
Proposals have already been submitted. Some committee meetings, not public committee meetings yet, but some committee meetings have been scheduled, and the delegates, I think, are now beginning to settle down to work.
How long do you think it'll be before your public hearings of the committees will start?
It depends on the committee chairman. Most of them feel that they need a week and a half in order to give their people the opportunity to review the issues, to do a little background, to call in resource people, so that at such time as they do have public hearings, they are able to get at the pertinent questions and have background in which to evaluate the proposals that are submitted.
The debate on the floor will take place sometime after that, I presume.
After a committee has had a chance to go over a proposal and develop a report, then the committee comes and makes its report, and the convention goes into what they call a committee of the whole. And then it all hangs out. Whether the delegate has been a member of that committee or not, at that point he's got an opportunity to get up and propose any amendment to the proposal that's been submitted by that committee, and it gets really hammered around. And this is where really much of the work of the convention will take place.
Opening day's most exciting moments, I guess, were your election. You were elected as expected. Does this end whatever dissension there may be in the ConCon?
Well, I wouldn't want to presume that the concerns that triggered this contest are simply going to vanish because I got elected. There were concerns that they had, and I think it's going to be up to me as a chairman to try to demonstrate by keeping the debate and all the discussions on the issues wide open, and assuring the delegates every opportunity to be heard, and in the process being sure the public input is strong and adequate.
From a practical standpoint, do you think that total open debate on any question is going to make any difference on some of the more controversial issues? Isn't that really decided already by the election of the people, the delegates?
I don't really think so, Bob. I think you'll find that a number of delegates came here with some ideas of whether they're for or against a particular issue. I think you'll find that after they've had a chance to sit in and get real hard testimony on pros and cons of some of the things that they thought they were supporting, after they've seen the reaction from the public, I would be very much surprised if a number of votes didn't change substantially. And I wouldn't look to any preconceived ideas about what will fly and what won't fly.
And so ConCon 78 is off the ground. It's flying, even if the hopes and expectations of some will not be. For the next couple of months, the 102 ConCon delegates will be fully engaged in the study of such diverse issues as the way we select our judges, the limitations we place on public officers, the way we run our public schools, the way we fund our government. These and other issues will be embodied in the hundreds of separate proposals, which will be probed and dissected in committee and in floor debate.
I can see if we had only about 5 or 10 major issues that we could go one by one, yes or no. There's no problem there. But if we're going to end up with about 35 or 40 specific issues to be described on the ballot, we have a real problem here in trying to make sure that what we present or the format of this ballot is going to be one that's not only fair, but one that will be understood by the public.
Delegate and retiring State Senator Bob Tyra indicating the concern felt by delegates as the final week began for ConCon 78. I'm Bob Miller for Hawaii Public Television. More than 2 months ago, on July 5th, 102 citizens of Hawaii, elected by the people, began meeting here at the old federal building to consider Hawaii's Constitution and decide whether and in what manner amendments should be made to it. Their work is almost finished. On Wednesday, September 20th, the text of some 30 proposed amendments will be delivered to the Office of Lieutenant Governor in time for inclusion in the November general election ballot. The following day, ConCon is expected to adjourn and move out of its offices here in the federal building. But at the end of ConCon 78 is approaching, its work has not yet started to let up. This past week saw long hours of debate on several of the more important questions facing the convention. On Monday, the Committee of the Whole began consideration of the proposal on suffrage and election, a session that began at 9 a.m. and didn't end until after 3:30 the following morning. Wallace Weatherwax, chairman of the Committee on Bill of Rights, Suffrage and Election, opened the debate.
Let me cover generally what the committee proposal deals with, Committee Proposal 16. There is a new provision with reference to forced resignation, where any public official who intends to run for an office which happens to overlap the present office held, then in that case there would be a requirement for him to resign. The next important item would be in Article 2 with reference to the primary election. As you're aware, the Article 2 has nothing on primary elections in the present Constitution. This would put language in as to when the primary election is to be held. Presently, there is a 30-day span between the holding of the primary election and general election. The committee decided that they would place a minimum 45-day limit, and when I emphasize the 45-day minimum, because it does not preclude the legislature from using a greater amount, larger than 45 days. So if you will look at the language in the proposal, it talks about a minimum of 45 days. Also with reference to the nominating procedure, which the primary election is in the parties, the question of whether this should be a closed, open, or blanket primary, and it was the consensus of the committee that the closed primary, which is the system we presently have, is what was desired. The next new section, also dealing with campaign public financing, it directs the legislature to begin a public financing fund for the purpose of assisting candidates in partial public financing along the line of a matching fund concept, which was one of the concepts discussed in the committee. It also talks about a spending limitation, and again, these concepts should be kept separate. For instance, the spending limitation would be on the candidate. So the spending limitation would be on the candidate, and under the present constitutional law, this is permissible under the case of Buckley versus Vallejo, when, in fact, public financing is provided. So if the candidate accepts public financing, a spending limitation may be imposed on him. The committee proposal, however, did take a step further and suggest that spending limitations be included for all candidates, running for office. There's some question as to the constitutionality of this. However, I believe it was the intention of the committee that a re-examination of the Buckley versus Vallejo case should be undertaken to determine whether or not, in fact, it is constitutional or unconstitutional. And this would be a beginning step toward that. The third concept, which I would ask that you keep clearly in mind, is that of contribution limitations. And this would be a donor giving contributions to a candidate, which is separate from a candidate's spending limitation. The contribution limitation does not set any amounts. It directs the legislature to set an amount of limitation on donors. And there is no particular specifications, but the committee had before them the federal election laws and the Federal Election Commission, and with respect to contribution limitations, that has been specifically held constitutional in the Buckley versus Vallejo case. And just for information, I believe there's a $1,000 donor limitation. And there are other various provisions, which perhaps we'll discuss at a later time. The direct democracy concepts of initiative, referendum, and recall, all three were considered by the committee, and the committee did not reach a consensus, meaning that there were not 16 votes, which would be a majority of the 30-member committee, to pass the proposal to the convention for consideration. So for that reason, there are no initiative, referendum, or recall proposals before you or part of the committee proposal.
The questions of initiative, referendum, and recall did not come up for debate before the Committee of the Whole until 11 o'clock on Monday evening, and thus we were not able to cover them with our cameras. The initiative question was debated until after 2 a.m., referendum and recall from then until 3:30. All were defeated. Earlier, another controversial proposal by Delegate Masu Dyer was also rejected by the convention.
Mr. Chairman, first let me explain what this amendment does. If favorably considered by this body, it would require an elected public official to resign from office should he or she change his or her political party at any time prior to 45 working days before the deadline for voters to change their party designation for the primary election in the last year of his or her term. For example, a state representative elected in November 1978 could not change party affiliation until May 1980. The purpose of the amendment should be clear. Over the years, we have witnessed elected officials of both major parties abuse the party system by switching parties soon after being elected to office, or changing their party preferences at the time they file nomination papers, long after the deadline for voters to switch their registration. In both cases, I cannot help but feel that the people are the losers. When one is voting for a candidate, the party is no secret. In fact, it is part of the tacit contract that comes into existence between the successful candidate and those responsible for his or her election. To change parties thereafter is a unilateral breaking of that contract. For those who maintain or change their party preference in anticipation of being able to vote for certain candidates in the primary, it is nothing short of an outrage to find out a month later that certain candidates will run as members of the opposite party. This amendment would prevent the ridiculous situation whereby a candidate, because of a party change after the switching deadline, cannot vote for oneself. It makes a mockery of our party system and breeds nothing but disillusionment toward politics and politicians. We've seen this comedy played in mayoral races, council races, and in the House of Representatives. However, such humor is at best of a bittersweet nature. Today, the right of elected officials to change parties knows no control. This is at the expense of the integrity of our political system. This amendment would serve as a reasonable deterrent to political misbehavior, which at times may be justified, but which should at all times be questioned.
I think that it would be rather dangerous for us sitting here in convention, especially since we only meet once every 10 years, to try to put into the convention, the Constitution, amendments that would take care of every conceivable situation as it arises. I realize that what happened this last time really caught the party off base, and I think it's an action that most of us would not condone. But I think the answer to this problem is, again, like a lot of other things, is voter reaction the next time the election comes around. I think history will bear the facts out, present company excluded perhaps, that every time a person switches, there is a certain amount of momentum lost, and maybe his integrity is challenged from time to time. And I think that that is where it rightfully belongs. Let the people decide as to this, whether this is the type of political or public official that they would like to elect, a person who gives up one party philosophy for another for the sake of his expediency. I'd hate to see our Constitution cluttered up with all kinds of possibilities just to, take care of any political candidate who decides to do one thing or another. Otherwise, we would have several chapters on this, in this area rather than just one short paragraph.
I think some people would be very upset if they realized that their representatives switched parties and they had supported that particular candidate because of his party, only to find that if something happened to that representative, the governor would have to appoint another person from the representative's new party. This is an aggravation which I feel is unfair to the voters who supported their candidate because of party. I don't blame the people who have switched one way or the other. I feel that they have all had good reasons. Delegate Dyer's amendment does not punish people for switching. It allows switching on a specified day, so people know what they'll be voting for. I think it's a very good amendment. Then you could see which party your candidate is running for, and you could switch parties yourself accordingly. I don't feel that this amendment is unconstitutional or infringes upon the rights of any candidate or elected public official, because I feel that if you're making the public declare 5 months before the election, then certainly you could ask your candidate to announce his position 45 days before that. Please consider this amendment. I think it's a very good one, and I think it'll benefit the public and the voting public of Hawaii.
While this and the important IR&R amendments to the committee proposal failed, two others were approved. One would require that voters' party preference be kept secret. This could mean the end of the closed primary as we know it today. The other, an idea offered by Delegate Donna Odinaka, would allow voters to cast a vote for the statement, none of the above. Such votes would not determine the results of an election, but would provide guidance of a kind to politicians. Both of these amendments could be rejected during second reading, which was scheduled to take place too late for inclusion in this program. The final committee of the whole debate took place on Thursday on a package of amendments proposed by Chairman Anthony Chang of the Committee of Environment, Agriculture, Conservation, and Land.
We are proud that the proposal and report are the products of many minds and hands. As the report notes, 15 public hearings were held on 5 islands to consider 117 individual proposals. After many long hours of discussion and work sessions, the committee decided that these provisions were the vital constitutional issues to be presented to you. All of the committee members contributed to the substance and phrasing of the documents. The committee members will continue to contribute their effort and skill in shaping the convention's proposal to the people. In discussing the various issues this morning, I will call upon members of the committee to speak when the matters relate to their area of interest or expertise. Mr. Chairman, we are aware that there will be a number of amendments to the committee proposals discussed in this committee of the whole. This was expected. The committee product was formed by representatives of all interests in our community, and it was inevitable that controversy would result. This is the essence of democracy. We only ask that the delegates consider wisely the vital issues presented to them today and reflect upon the words that rang so loud and clear on the first day of the convention. O Hawaii, O sands of my birth, my native home, I rejoice in the blessings of heaven. O Hawaii, aloha. Reflect on your blessings, delegates. Mauke aloha no Hawaii. I request a few remarks from Delegate Ho on behalf of the committee.
Delegate Ho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak only in regards to Section 1 and our deliberations on Section 1. The committee proposal for this section is an important step toward making a balance between the use of our natural resources, which is necessary, and their preservation. In our present Constitution, the direction to care for our natural resources seems to be overweighted by the emphasis on development and utilization. Though the use of our natural resources is necessary, it must be done in such a manner as to ensure the optimum long-term benefits for the inhabitants of our state. Their development must be judicious. Their use must be consistent with their conservation to maintain them for future availability. When considering use and development of our natural resources, the economic and social benefits need to be major concerns. The total concept of economics, that of careful and thrifty use of the resources which are necessities of life, rather than the narrow sense, that of immediate dollar return, and the total concept of social benefits in considering their use must be among the basic criteria for development and use of our natural resources. This proposal strives to make clear that our obligations include the welfare of future generations, and therefore, in the use of our resources, we must protect our natural resources against irreversible depletion, waste, or destruction, and safeguard the natural beauty of our state.
The amendments to the Constitution that were proposed by the committee would assure a healthful environment to all citizens by granting them the right to bring a court suit directly, even though they are not immediately affected by a hazard. Establish a state water resources agency with the obligation to protect, control, and regulate all of Hawaii's water resources. Require a 2/3 vote by the legislature before Hawaii's best agricultural lands could be redesignated for other use. Give the state powers to conserve and develop Hawaii's natural beauty. For the first time in the country, the state would be able to establish a land bank to purchase developmental rights as a means to control land speculation and exercise greater control over development, and make it possible for sea farms to be established by granting exclusive use to portions of the oceans around the islands. The debate had been delayed one day to achieve what Chairman Chang called a consensus among delegates, but not all delegates joined in that consensus. Michael Crozier, for example, was unhappy with the committee proposal on water. He wanted a statement that would say simply, the state shall regulate and control all water.
This is a simple amendment. It does 6 things. First of all, it acknowledges that the state possesses the power to regulate and control all water. Second, it implies that the state's responsibility to assure the proper management of Hawaii's water resources. Third, it does not rule out the legislative creation of a water agency. It leaves with the legislature the task of determining whether or not the state needs one. Fourth, it makes no assignments of functions and powers, Thus, it allows for the highest degree of flexibility regarding this difficult topic of water resource. Fifth, it makes no reference to collective ownership of water resources, and thus it makes it impossible to be construed as taking away private water rights, as some people are concerned now. And sixth, Mr. Chairman and delegates, which I think is the most important part of my speech. Mr. Chairman, I have the ability to listen and pay attention. I'm not good looking, I'm not smart, but I can pay attention and listen. I've had discussions and correspondence with some different people. I've listened to testimony in public hearings. All these people have came and told us basically that we all have been directed toward the statement by which exactly what we want to say, that is, that the water resources in the state shall be subject to the regulations and control of the state and no more. What they're saying, sir, is just use one simple statement. Don't get tangled up in a lot of words.
What this proposal does, in one sentence, say the state shall regulate and control all water. I think what we have here is a problem that has pervaded in Hawaii historically for years and years and years. You have the concern because evidently the people feel that nothing has been done to date with respect to regulating or taking care of the use of water. What we just did a little while ago was say that this agency shall be responsible. And it didn't have to be a special agency. It could be an agency within the existing departments. In the committee, we argued and we were besieged by lobby, by opinion from all kinds of attorneys, all kinds of people who say that they're experts in water, all kinds of things. I think what we just did a few minutes ago will show historically down the road that we have the nerve and at least the gumption to look into the future and protect the water resources for generations that are just being born and those yet unborn. So, Mr. Chairman, I speak strongly against the proposed amendment if the amendment intends to just delete verbiage, because many committees, including the Hawaiian Affairs, has come out with more than just constitutional one-liners. Mahalo.
That amendment lost, as did one by Delegate Joseph Suki, to eliminate the entire committee proposal on water resources. However, the delegates did approve an amendment requiring a 2/3 approval by the legislature for construction of nuclear power plants in the state. With the convention about to end, attention has turned to the Committee on Submission and Information. One of its jobs is to propose the way amendments will appear on the ballot in November. Last weekend, the committee decided not to allow voters to reject all proposed amendments with a single vote, as was possible in 1968. That stirred up a flurry of complaint, especially from the League of Women Voters. So on Wednesday, the committee reconsidered the matter and asked convention attorney James Funaki for advice.
If you were to have a situation where you had eliminated that Part B, which called for an no to all the questions, so that the voter is put to the task of placing the card, aligning the puncher with the question, and punching each one, and let's say that there were about 50 questions, then it may come to a point where a voter gets thoroughly discouraged after going through 20 questions and he sees 30 more questions and he simply gives up. If that is in fact, and I don't know if it is, if that in fact is the situation, then I think there is an element of fairness that you have to consider. That is it fair to put a voter to that kind of a burden and task?
The committee also got a briefing from Elections Administrator Morris Takushi, who pointed out that by not providing the possibility for voters to cast a single vote against all amendments, the convention's package might stand a greater chance of being defeated, since not only must each amendment get a majority of yes votes, but this majority must be at least 35% of the votes cast. The committee decided to provide an opportunity for voters to say yes or no on all amendments, as well as yes or no on each separate proposal, after Delegate Bob Tyra led the way.
I went along with the group last time in knocking out Part B, and of course the ill publicity which that generated, that disturbed many of us. As I understand this, what we did is constitutional, it would be legal, according to our attorney's advice here. But what worries me is that in the process of trying to prove that what we did was legal, we'd be involved in a public controversy, and as a result of that kind of a controversy, the reaction at the time of ratification by the voters may not be a very good one. And with an unfavorable reaction on the part of the public, whom we're trying to not sell, but trying to accept the proposals which come out of this convention, we may not get a fair reaction, and this is what bothers me. And I think, as expressed by some of us here, whatever we do, we want to make sure that we're going to be fair, give them all a chance. If they want to vote all yes, vote all no, so be it. And especially with the number of issues to be listed here as exceptions to Part C, I'm afraid that the bad publicity that we get and to be accused of not being fair, that might have a bad result as far as the ratification of the ConCon proposals go. I can see if we had only about 5 or 10 major issues that we could go one by one, yes or no. There's no problem there. But if we're going to end up with about 35 or 40 specific issues to be described on the ballot, we have a real problem here in trying to make sure that what we present for the format of this ballot is going to be one that's not only fair, but one that will be understood by the public.
The Committee on Submission and Information also has as its job educating the public about the proposed amendments that will be brought out of the convention before the general election takes place. To that end, it has organized a massive public information campaign that will get underway as soon as the convention ends. Thank you for joining us on ConCon 78. I'm Bob Miller for Hawaii Public Television.